So in the last video, we focused on identifying the 7 shapes of our basic functions, which are these here. But now we want to get really familiar with them so we can start transforming them. So the better we know these, the better our transformations are going to be. So we're going to look at each of these individually, and we want to identify the y-intercept, x-intercept, domain, and range of all of these at once. So each time I bring you to a new one of these, I suggest that you pause the video and see if you can find these things all on your own. Let me review them real quick with you here. The y-intercept is where it intercepts the y-axis. The x-intercept is where it intercepts the x-axis. The domain is the possible x values on the graph, left and right. The range is the possible y values on the graph, the up and down. And so, in this graph, I suggest that you pause the video and come up with these 4 things all on your own. All right, this intercepts my x-axis and my y-axis at the same place, which is the origin. So both my x-intercept and my y-intercept are 0, 0. The domain is the possible x values on the graph. How far left does this graph go? How far right does this graph go? This graph goes forever in both directions, so my domain is negative infinity to infinity. Range is my y values. How far down does this graph go, and how far up does this graph go? This goes down and up forever in both directions, so my range is negative infinity to infinity. And that's what we're going to be doing with all of these. Y equals x squared. Pause the video and fill out these 4 on your own. X-intercept and y-intercept are again both at the origin, and you're going to notice that becoming a theme, or hopefully you should. Domain is the x value, so how far left does this graph go and how far right does this graph go. So this graph will go forever in the left direction and forever in the right direction. So my domain is negative infinity to positive infinity. My range is up and down. How far down does this graph go and how far up does this graph go? Well, notice this graph goes up forever in both directions, and so my ending value is going to be infinity. But notice my graph does not hit any point down here. It stops right here. So that is where my range begins. It begins at this y value, which is 0. 0 is included on the graph. It is a point on the graph, and so that is where this bracket for my interval notation comes into play. And so we have finished up the x squared. X cubed, your turn. Pause it and do it all on your own. X and y-intercept, again at the origin. Domain, this graph goes forever to the left and forever to the right. So my domain is negative infinity to positive infinity. Range is forever down and forever up. And so same thing for the range. Okay. Square root of x. Pause the video, work it on your own. Again, my x and y intercepts are both at the origin. Again, this is a theme because these are the basic functions. These are not transformed in any sort of way yet. Domain is my x values. So how far left and how far right does this graph go? The right goes forever. The left, notice we don't see anything over here. We could not plug anything negative into this. It gave us imaginary numbers. So my domain starts right here where my x value is 0, and it goes, we already said, forever to the right. Range is up and down. So let me get rid of this here. Okay. If I follow this graph out farther and farther and farther and farther, we would see it goes up forever in that direction. So my upmost answer is infinity. But we see that if we go down, our graph doesn't go anything below this value right here. Notice we don't have any values down here. So it stops at my y value being 0. So my domain and range are both from 0 to infinity. And that's because we cannot put negative values in square roots, and we cannot get negative values out of square roots. Y equals 1 over x. This might be probably the most complicated one, but I have faith in you. Stop the video and see if you can do it on your own. X and y intercept. So my y-intercept, notice it never intercepts the y-axis. I actually don't have a y-intercept. My x-intercept, where it intercepts my x-axis, it doesn't. So I actually do not have an x-intercept as well. That's because I cannot plug 0 into my function, and I cannot get 0 out of my function. Domain is all of my possible x values. How far left and how far right does this go? So at first instance, you might think from negative infinity to infinity. Well, it's kind of true because it does go forever to the left and it does go forever to the right. But I just said that I cannot plug 0 into this function. So every x value will work with the exception of 0. So it is not this negative infinity up to 0 and then past 0. But I cannot include 0 in itself. You might also want to write this in set builder notation. It might be easier, meaning the set of x's such that x cannot equal 0. Same thing with the range then. It looks like it goes down and up forever, but again, we never get 0 out of this function. So in interval notation, you can write it in this format, or the set of y's such that y will not come out to be 0. Either one of those notation works. Okay. Just a couple more. Keep bearing with me. We're almost there. Y equals absolute value of x. Again, pause the video and come up with these 4 here. Okay, intercepts, same place, the origin. Domain is left and right. Notice this graph goes left forever and right forever, so negative infinity to infinity. Range is up and down. We see it goes up forever, but we see that it stops here. So my range is 0 to infinity. Remember, absolute value will only come out to be positive values. So that makes sense that my range will only be in the positive interval. And the last one, y equals cube root of x. Pause the video and work on it yourself. Okay, y-intercept, x-intercept, origin again. Domain goes forever left, forever right. And range, it goes forever down and forever up. And so now we have identified the intercepts and the domain and the range for all of these functions. And so hopefully that familiarizes yourself with them a little bit better. And so now when we see them and we try and transform them, you know exactly what they look like and exactly how to do that from here. And so in the next video, we're actually going to be starting our transformation.